couple of years ago, I was on a small plane at de Havilland that was backing out from the gate at O'Hare. Early in my career, hadn't flown a lot. Pilot gets on the intercom and says, "It's going to be a short flight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to Milwaukee. But there's a lot of turbulence between here and our destination, so we're going to keep the seatbelt sign fastened the whole time." Now, even though we're still on the ground, my hands grip the sides of the seat, because at that time I was afraid of flying, which actually is not true. You guys would know that better than most. Flying is fine. Crashing is what I fear, right? People aren't afraid of flying. They're afraid of going down. One of my stressors, have you ever noticed when something causes you stress, there are people in your life who don't share that particular stress, so they try to talk you out of it with logic? Don't you hate that? So this thing with fear of flying, my friends used to say, don't be afraid, it's much more dangerous to drive than it is to fly. Okay. One day a well-meaning friend comes, she must have just come from a meditation class or a yoga class. I'm telling her the story. She looks at me, she puts her hand on my heart. She looks me in the eye and says, "Don't be afraid. If you get on a plane and it's your time to go, just consider that your time to go." I said to her, "What if it's the pilot's time?" You know, like, shut up, leave me alone. So sure enough, the plane takes off and begins bouncing through the air like the proverbial stone over the proverbial pond, and every time the plane hits a bump, when the plane smooths out, I relax. I happened to look across the aisle. There, sitting next to his mother, was a boy who could not have been more than 5, 6 years old. Don't you know that every time the plane hit a bump and I went, this kid would go, whee! Exactly. Shown up by a 5-year-old, you know? And when the plane smoothed out and I'd relax, the kid would get upset. I remember he once looked at the ceiling, because that's where he heard the voice come from. He goes, "Hey, do it again." And I'm looking at this kid, and I have one of those moments where I understand how life works. They don't happen often, but when they do, they come with crystal clear clarity. And what I realized about this situation was that the boy and myself together were on the same airplane, yet we had completely different experiences. Our belief was different, even though we had the same information coming into us. And I'm thinking, how could this be? I'm a psychology major. I learned about stimulus response. We have the same stimuli. How come we have different responses? And I remember the way they wrote the stimulus response theory. Remember, it was S-R. And I'm thinking, somebody didn't tell me about the meaning of the dash, because that's what's going on. His dash is different than my dash. And what's the dash? The dash is simply our belief about what happens that drives our reality. You've heard this over and over the last couple of days, that it's your perception of things. Reality is what you believe. There is very little objective reality. So this thing that is the dash is essentially our self-talk. What we say to ourselves drives our behavior. Turns out we talk to ourselves all the time, defined as that ongoing dialogue we have with ourselves that determines our behavior. How many of you talk to yourselves? Some raise their hands, others go, "Do I or don't I?" No, I used to. I don't do it anymore. Maybe fruit in the supermarket, but turns out we talk to ourselves all the time. Sure, we're aware of it with the large things. Where should I go on vacation? What do I want to eat? How do I get out of this conversation? Those kinds of things. But even the subliminal things drive our behavior. Have you ever been walking down the street, someone's coming towards you and waving? You don't recognize that person, but your self-talk says, "Wave back anyway." Then you realize they're waving to the person behind you. Now what does your self-talk say? "Come here, quick." It's like, you don't be caught waving to the wrong person. What I've noticed over the last couple of days is that very much of the information, the guidance, the inspiration, the motivation that has been given to you is based on this concept of changing the way you talk to yourselves. So changing your belief, so changing your action. And what I'd like to offer you today is sort of a look at this model that I found for myself, that how do you actually do that? How do you do it? Self-talk is yeah, we know it. How do you do it? So I'm thinking back, and I realized, again, go back to the kid on the plane, here's the power of it. We had different perceptions, but in all 4 areas of human processing of information, turns out as human beings we process information on 4 levels: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. So essentially as human beings, we are creatures of mind, body, heart, and soul. Each of those areas, we were different, the boy and myself. Mentally, I'm thinking, this is scary. He's thinking, fun, fun. Physically, I'm tense and tight. He's loose and relaxed. Emotionally, I'm dealing with fear. He's connected to joy and happiness. And spiritually, I have no faith, even in aerodynamics. And this boy's at one with the universe. So what I'd like to do is sort of go into a little investigation into how we can individually, my interest is in you personally. Yes, everyone wants you to be a better employee, a better teammate. I think it all starts with us. And what I found for myself in my own work, on myself, is the biggest insight I've had into my own changes, and I'm still a work in progress, is when I started taking improv theater. I realized that improv theater skills, the skills that make improvisers successful, make all of us successful. And I'd like to offer you an insight into what those skills are.